Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter in the Eyewitness newsroom. A special digital edition of Eyewitness News post what was one of the perhaps the most important big developments so far in the Trump presidency, a day that I think will be significant for some time to come. Two of Mr. Trump's former, very close associates, Paul Manafort on the left, his former campaign chairman, and Michael Cohen on the right, a New York City lawyer who was Mr. Trump's personal and business lawyer for many years, both guilty tonight. Mr. Cohen pleading guilty to 8 counts of various charges we'll talk about tonight. Mr. Manafort found guilty of 8 counts, federal counts. We're going to talk about those. This is a live picture from West Virginia, where right now the crowd right there is getting ready to hear Donald Trump on what promised to be another campaign kind of rally. It says Trump digs coal, and his speech tonight in West Virginia, coming on the same day that his administration peeled back the Clean Air Act, many provisions of the Obama administration-backed Clean Air Act. He hopes it will reinvigorate the coal industry, but there are a lot of economists and experts who say that might not happen. It has already been decimated before. We will see. But he is going to talk about this, I assume, and we will listen in perhaps. But right now we're going to go to our correspondents. On the top screen, Terry Moran, the ABC News senior national correspondent. I understand, Terry, that's a new title. And Eyewitness News reporter Josh Einiger is in Lower Manhattan. Terry is in Washington. Josh was at the Cohen plea agreement and pleading in federal court. Terry is covering things for us in Washington. Terry, I want to start with you. Let's start with Mr. Cohen first, and then we can get right to Josh too. What's the big significance and the takeaway? He was, pleaded guilty to bank fraud, to income tax evasion, but most importantly for the politics of the country, to campaign finance violations, and that is the big takeaway here. Explain.
That is the big takeaway, because what Michael Cohen pled guilty to and what he said in court today is that he was paying off these women who had relations with the president in order to preserve the president's political viability in the campaign. And the reason why that's important is it wasn't just a personal matter. You can pay people off to keep their silence if you're embarrassed about what they have to say. But when you're running for office, you have to disclose every penny that helps your campaign. And if that money helped his campaign, as Cohen is saying it did, that means that as he just pled guilty to, he violated campaign laws by not admitting that to the Federal Election Commission, and others may have as well. The other significance is that he says 2 people inside the Trump campaign knew he was doing this. And so this is political peril and legal peril for the Trump campaign and maybe the guy at the top.
We don't know, of course, unless Josh Einiger, you heard something different, but we don't know who those officials were. But we do know, of course, because we've heard it. Mr. Cohen has a tape of him talking to Donald Trump, and they talked about the payment. We're talking about a payment to the porn star Stormy Daniels and to a former Playboy model. Both women say that they had affairs with Donald Trump, one more than 10 years ago, the other in 2016. Josh, did you hear who these officials might be?
Well, no, we didn't hear that in court today, Bill, but we actually did hear Cohen himself say that he was directed by the candidate, and if there's any question about who that candidate might be, his own lawyer, Cohen's lawyer, Lenny Davis, later put out a statement saying, quote, "Today he, Cohen, stood up and testified under oath that Donald Trump directed him to commit a crime by making payments to 2 women for the principal purpose of influencing an election. If those payments were a crime for Mr. Cohen," Davis continued, "then why wouldn't they be a crime for Donald Trump?" And that is one of the biggest questions I think that has come out of this hearing today, and what its impact is on the ongoing investigations swirling around Donald Trump, being conducted by the special counsel, Robert Mueller. Of course, that investigation primarily started as an inquiry into Russian interference in the election, but also it's continued into an obstruction of justice inquiry, and it has sort of spider-webbed out from there. They raided Michael Cohen's hotel room, his office, his home here in Manhattan back in April. They took more than 4 million documents and other items, electronic devices, and you have to wonder what evidence they have from that was so compelling that it led Michael Cohen to take this plea today without, as we understand it, without signing any kind of cooperation agreement with the government. He just pleaded guilty today. So it's not really clear if he will be cooperating with them. It's not really clear if the prosecutors are going to request leniency from the judge when it comes time to sentence him in December. He went ahead, at least publicly, and has pleaded guilty with no obvious offers of any kind of leniency on the other side.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Josh. Terry, as I understand it, though, this was referred by Robert Mueller. This was not his office that raided the offices and the home of Michael Cohen. It was referred to the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District, that is New York City, and they handled this case, correct?
That's right. This is something that Mueller seems to be wanting to do as he reaches what many people believe is the tail end of his investigation here. He's farming out some of these cases, perhaps as insurance in case he gets fired. They are now in other parts of the justice system. And perhaps just as a matter of efficiency, these were crimes that he found Mr. Cohen allegedly committed in that district, the Southern District of New York, and so that prosecutor will handle it. This one here, Manafort's case, the Office of Special Counsel brought himself.
Let's before we talk about Manafort, I do want to ask you, Terry, because you're the lawyer of the three of us, something very interesting Josh talked about. There was no sort of cooperation agreement attached to any of this, but what are we to assume from all this? Josh has done a good job reporting today that wasn't the case on Eyewitness News earlier today, but now raises the issue, what does that mean? And it doesn't block him cooperating with prosecutors going forward.
That's right. There can be all kinds of reasons. He may be at odds on the nature of the deal, if any, he might get from prosecutors, or he may just wanting to become clean for his own personal reasons. What he said in court today, that President Trump, that the candidate directed him to pay these women, which would be a contribution to the president's political campaign because it helped keep these women silent, that is a crime. And he involves the president himself in it. And he may have done that just out of his own conscience or because he's in the process of negotiation. We don't know at this point, but it's big.
And as Josh just said, of course, as Lanny Davis, Mr. Cohen's lawyer, said, who was a lawyer for the Clintons, we should remember, and a confidant and advisor for them many years ago, he says, well, if Mr. Cohen is saying that, then where's Mr. Trump? And I do want to talk about that before we get to Manafort, Terry and Josh. What does this mean? We haven't heard any Congress people, including many of the Congress people who are on what the so-called religious right, talking about the president, his lawyer saying in court that at the behest of the president, I paid money to hush money to a porn star and a Playboy model. As we look at President Trump tonight, you can't see it, you guys, but we're looking at President Trump starting his speech in West Virginia. Where's the political action here from Congress? We've heard not a peep. Either one of you can answer that.
Well, Bill, I don't think it has much political ramification within the Republican Party. They are rock solid behind this president. He has the kind of approval numbers in his party that few presidents have enjoyed. He has changed the Republican Party. It's the Trump Party. And since the Trump Party, the Republican Party, controls Congress, any impeachment is highly unlikely unless more comes out. But I think this will trouble many Republicans, perhaps the rank and file, perhaps some in Washington, who did hold President Clinton to account on a perjury charge out of a personal matter. This is a campaign finance violation out of a personal matter, but I wouldn't expect any action anytime soon.
All right, good point. Josh, we're going to turn over to Manafort questions, but you were there this afternoon. Any legal questions, anything that came on your mind that you want to ask Terry? Terry, I should tell you that Josh had the line of the day when he had his story at 5 o'clock on Eyewitness News. He said, Michael Cohen once said he would take a bullet for President Trump. Today, he took a plea. Josh, anything you want to ask Terry about?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Bill. I mean, I just find the whole thing fascinating that we went from, Michael Cohen being this pugnacious, notably profane type A embodiment of Trump and the Trump organization, and is now suddenly, in the middle of this, or has completed this sort of striking fall from grace. And I guess I'm wondering, what is going on behind the scenes? Are they really, do we think they're negotiating with him? The lack of a cooperation agreement that was announced today, does that or should that tell us something? what is likely happening. And that's one thing that I, as a non-lawyer, am trying to sort of get my mind around. Why wouldn't he fight this out in court? Is the evidence against him that they took from his office and his home that compelling? And what else, I guess, might there be that this is what he agreed to plead to?
Terry?
Well, once again, I should say I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV. but what may be happening, look, Michael Cohen, as you pointed out, Bill, he had his office raided, he had his home raided. They got a trove of very personal information about Michael Cohen. And there have been reports in the New York Times and elsewhere that he is being investigated for millions of dollars of bank fraud and other fraud. Perhaps, they said, plead guilty to this. We'll see about a deal on the big, heavy charges that are coming your way, if in fact they are. And that may be what is happening. One thing I would say, though, is this Manafort trial, the Cohen stuff, is not that close to Trump. They are. But Manafort's tax crimes predate his relationship with Trump. Cohen's taxi crimes, if that's in fact what they are, alleged to be, they predate. So they don't have any direct relationship with Trump. It may be that as the special counsel is digging around associates of Trump's, he's finding other crimes.
Let me offer one question to you, Terry, about that as you answer Josh's question, and that is the Manafort case. Yes, the tax crimes predate the Trump involvement, but the evidence came out that one of the charges was he didn't register as a foreign agent for his work with Ukraine and the government there, and he wanted that work because he needed the money, because he was running out of money. He became the chairman of the Trump campaign because he said, or his sources said, people close to him said, it gave him gravitas with the government of Ukraine and others that he was close to Trump. Is there no tie-in there?
Well, there is. That relationship with the Ukraine, though, with Ukraine predated Trump from 2010, I believe, on, when Viktor Yanukovych, very close to Putin, was running Ukraine. Paul Manafort was making tens of millions of dollars. Then Yanukovych got thrown out in a revolution, and the golden goose was dead, and his money train ran out. He wanted to be campaign chairman so he could look around elsewhere and see if there's somebody else that he could pick up as essentially somebody who could sponsor his very lavish lifestyle. But at the end of the day, the tax crimes are from 2010 to 2014. There was one bank fraud charge, which he was not convicted on, that was current with his work for Trump. So in some ways, this is a big test for Special Counsel Robert Mueller. This man was close to President Trump, but the crimes themselves, not.
All right, good point. Final pop quiz. We got about 15 seconds left from each of you. Josh, first you, and then to Terry Moran. Where do we go from here? What happens next, Josh?
Well, I don't know, Bill. I mean, every time you hear one of these revelations, you wonder if this is sort of the end, because it seems like the walls are closing in. I mean, you hear these revelations, day in and day out. Some cases, like today, multiple revelations that you'd think would spell the end. You'd think that there would be a conclusion coming up soon with the special counsel investigation. What else might there be? I've stopped trying to predict these things. I mean, and I'm not even in Washington, and I'm no lawyer, but I've stopped really trying to figure that question out, because I find it so incredibly unpredictable.
Probably a smart thing. Terry?
Well, the special counsel was hired to investigate the question, did Americans betray our country by cooperating with a foreign adversary, Russia, in attacking our democracy? That's the big question. And on that, while there have been a lot of reports, so far, we have not seen from the special counsel charged with investigating it evidence that was true.
Meanwhile, Microsoft disclosing today that the conservatives are getting hacked and trolled by Russians, and they're trying to get into their system as well. Hopefully, this country can rally together to stop that, because that's the biggest issue, of course. Terry Moran, who working double time today in Washington for ABC News, and Josh Einiger, always working double time for us. Josh, we'll see you back here on Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock. And Terry, I understand you're working on a story for Nightline. We will watch that after Eyewitness News a little later tonight. Both of you.
All right.
Guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, thank you. And thank you for joining us on the special digital edition of Eyewitness News. It is now 7:21, and you're watching President Trump live in West Virginia at another one of his campaign rally kind of gatherings. This time, Trump digs coal on the day that he blew away President Obama's Clean Air Act provisions dealing with global warming and strict restrictions on coal. As you can see, the crowd on its feet greeting President Trump. We thank you for watching. We'll have the latest, of course, tonight, anytime online for breaking news and the wrap-up of what has been a huge day in terms of the legal world and political world and on the minds of many Americans as well. The guilty verdict and guilty plea from Michael Cohen, a lawyer for Donald Trump, and from Paul Manafort, Mr. Trump's former campaign chairman. We'll have a complete wrap-up and any new developments tonight on Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock. Until then, I'm Bill Ritter in the Eyewitness Newsroom. Have a great night. We'll see you later.